Welcome to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm going to be interviewing Jeanne Bowerman. To say she's multi-talented really doesn't do her justice, as you'll see in this interview. She's got a ton of things going on. She is a screenwriter with several projects in various stages of development. She's the editor over at scriptmag.com. She works as a consultant, and she runs the popular Twitter event, Script Chat. The interview covers a lot of ground, so there's something in there for everyone. She's really an inspiration, so stay tuned for that. Today I'm going to announce the winner of the free email fax blast that I'm giving away for leaving iTunes reviews. But first, I want to thank Nonso Maduke for sending in a bunch of screenplays to add to the Selling Your Screenplay library. It's very much appreciated. If you're looking to read screenplays, please check out the Selling Your Screenplay library at sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. And if you have some scripts that you don't see in our library, please email them to me so I can add them. I want to give a big thanks to everyone who did leave me reviews in iTunes, specifically since the last episode. Thank you, ABCD Pluribusnam, Sean Speak, Yankee Trudel, David Gardner, and the Kaz. They all left me nice reviews in iTunes, so thank you for that. And I want to thank Adam Strange, Ginger Shine, and an unpronounceable Russian-looking name. I apologize for my ignorance on the Russian alphabet, or maybe it's not even Russian, but there was an additional comment there. So thank you, everybody who left me reviews in iTunes as well. So to choose the winner of the contest, I simply put in everyone's name into a spreadsheet and then used random.org to pick a number from 1 through 22, since there are currently 22 comments on the Selling Your Screenplay podcast in iTunes. And the winner is Yankee Trudel. So, Mr. Trudel, please send me an email and we'll get your blast out. As always, if you find these podcasts helpful, please do leave a review in iTunes or on YouTube or wherever you might be listening to or viewing this podcast. Thank you again. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts. In today's interview, Jeannie talks about a lot of different stuff, so there are a lot of links for today's episode. Again, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts if you want to follow up and learn more about some of the things that we talk about. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell Your Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide: how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. So just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I just finished a sort of a dark romantic comedy that I've been writing for the last 5 or so months. So it's time to start sending that out. Today I'm actually uploading it to Inktip, and I'm going to try a few virtual pitch fest pitches, and I'm going to be uploading it to the Blacklist. And then next week I'm going to be doing a blast using my email and fax database. If you haven't used the Blacklist site, it's probably worth a try. It's fairly new, at least compared to Inktip and Virtual Pitch Fest. They do have some decent agents, managers, and producers on the site looking for material, so I think it can work. I think the biggest problem is that in order to get into their system and get people recommending your script, you've got to buy script reviews. And if those 1 or 2 script reviews don't turn out well, then you're basically sunk with that script. But I'm going to try something new with this one. I'm going to upload it, and then I'm going to put the download link in my query letter so that producers who use the site will be able to get the script straight away from the Blacklist. What I'm hoping is that I'll get a bunch of downloads and potential ratings. I think the producers who download it can also rate it, and then I'll see how this mixes in with the Blacklist algorithm of having my script recommended to other people. My hope, too, is that a bunch of producers might be kinder to me than a bunch of bitter script readers. My hunch is that if a producer doesn't like the script, they won't bother giving it a bad rating, but if they do like it, they might actually take the time to give it a rating. Whereas the bitter script reader who you're paying $50 per read to has no real incentive to be nice. Now, I could be totally misunderstanding how the system works. I mean, that's one of the things I don't like about the blacklist is that there are a lot of details that I don't fully understand. I've actually listened to a couple of podcasts that Franklin Leonard has been on. He's the one who runs it, and I've read a couple of interviews and I've listened to a couple of podcasts he's been on, and there's still some things I don't fully understand. So I'm just trying to test it. I've uploaded a few scripts in the past there and just testing it kind of to see what can happen there. So it's only $25 to have a script there for a month. So we'll just see if this works or does anything at all. So now let's get into the main segment. It's an interview with Jeanne Bowerman. Again, she's a screenwriter, editor of scriptmag.com, and one of the founders of Script Chat, which is a weekly Twitter event. Between Script Chat and her huge Twitter following, she's become a social media expert too. She does a lot of consulting on a variety of topics, and we'll actually talk about some of that in the interview. So here it is. Thank you, Jeannie, for coming on the show. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So for the listeners who don't know you, can you just give us a quick overview of your background, kind of how you got started in writing and how you got to the place you are now?
Well, we talked about social media before. Social media has definitely had a huge impact in my career and how I've gotten here. I started off as a owner and manager of a motel and restaurant, believe it or not. 15 years. And it wasn't until my 40s that I started writing. And it's because I got fired from a job. I was doing medical transcriptioning, and this really pompous doctor kept telling me that these words, kept insisting that these words that he wrote were actually in the English dictionary, and they weren't. He was completely making them up. And I went to Cornell, like I'm not an idiot. So like I know that these are not words, and I refused to type them because it's a legal document. And so he fired me and called me nothing but a glorified secretary. And that's when I decided that if I was going to be treated like shit, I might as well be a writer. Because we're going to get rejected and fired and all of that stuff. So I thought I was thinking I'm pretty ready for this. So I just kind of dove in and started off wanting to write a novel, but not having any idea how to do that. And then one of my friends from college said, "Why don't you write a screenplay? It's so much easier." And so I wrote a few with her and then just branched off on my own and started a Twitter account because I started writing a narrative adaptation of the Pulitzer Prize winning book Slavery by Another Name. And I wanted to create some sort of buzz about the project, so I opened a Twitter account, not having any idea the impact that was going to have on my life. And from Twitter, starting Twitter, birthed the screenwriting chat, Script Chat. And then we got screenwriters together on Sunday nights, every Sunday night for an hour to talk. And it's a free format where we bring guests in. And because of Script Chat, I got noticed by Script Magazine. And they asked me to write a single article for their website about Slavery by Another Name. And the then editor, Joshua Stecker, we became friends over the course of that next year. And it turned into, hey, why don't you write a regular blog? And so that's when I started writing Balls of Steel, and where I talk about how it takes balls of steel to make it in this industry. And I completely share all my mistakes and things I've done wrong. And I, keep it totally real and kind of let people learn as I'm learning. And then Final Draft at that point owned Script Magazine. It got bought out by F&W Media. They completely reworked it, stopped doing the physical magazine, the hard copy, and just were online, and they were looking for an editor. So I applied for the position, and there you have it. So
okay.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay. I'd like to say that again.
Media played a huge role.
So I'd like to take a step back. I get a lot of, and I'm sure you get a lot of questions too about people, that are past their 20s, they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, they have a family or responsibilities, taking that leap and actually deciding that you're going to be a writer. I mean, I the first thing that occurs to me, I've done some work in the restaurant industry, and the first thing that occurs to me about running a hotel is that you were probably working 18 hours a day, running a restaurant and a hotel 7 days a week. So there obviously is no time for writing. So that's really not a great, it's not a great job to try and launch a writing career from. But just some words of advice for people that are looking to make that transition. I mean, it's got to be hard. People have bills to pay, responsibilities, kids, families, husbands, wives. It
is really hard. I mean, I have so much respect for people who stick at it and don't give up. And I suspect a lot of people give up because just for practical reasons, that they can't pay the bills. They've got a spouse who isn't supportive, and somebody just saying, where's the money? Show me the money. And I tried, after I left the motel, I did do freelance writing for a couple of years, and that is brutal. That is brutal. Like, you're querying all the time. You might get enough to pay the bills for this month, but you have no idea how you're going to pull it out the next month. And so it's a constant hustle. But one of the things that's great about freelance writing articles or whatever, is a couple things. One is that it gets you trained for the hustle and trained for the rejection, and also an editor, and wherever you write for, an editor is going to come back with you with notes. So it's just like a producer coming back to you with notes. Mm-hmm. And you have to consider the voice of the magazine or the voice of the publication. It's a really good training ground for working with producers and for collaboration. And it's a training ground for rejection and all of that. But it's also, what I loved about it was also, while there was that rejection, there was the flip side of validation. You write something and it actually gets read by people. People mm-hmm. to enjoy your words, as opposed to when you're writing a script for years, nobody sees it. It's, you and your hard drive. And so that's what I love about writing the column for Script Magazine, writing articles for other sites, is that people get to read my words and they don't have to wait for the script to make it to the screen, because mm-hmm. God, that would take forever.
Yeah. One of the things that occurs to me, and I just was reading some of your blog posts, your Balls of Steel articles, and I totally get what you're saying. You have a great voice, and I'm sure, that didn't just come out of nowhere. It's from all this writing that you've done for years. So I totally get that it's a great training ground as a screenwriter. The one thing that I would worry about, and you can tell me how you've handled this, is that in tennis, I was on the tennis team, I played tennis, and during the summers I actually would coach tennis. And after teaching tennis for 6 hours a day, I didn't really want to play a lot of tennis. And how do you find time to work on your novel and to work on your screenplays after you've spent, the bulk of your day actually writing already?
So I finally discovered the rhythm. I finally have it. And I was actually going to write, I was talking to one of my friends about this the other day. I think I need to write a Balls post about this, because there are some people who are morning people and some people who are night people. Whatever it is that you are, like if you're a morning person, that's when you should write. If you're a night person, then make sure you're writing at night, because what I was trying to do, I'm extremely responsible and I'm extremely practical. So I would just get up, and at 7:30 in the morning, after I had my son on the bus, I'd be at my laptop starting my day job, working. And there's never enough hours in the day to get your day job done. I have 55 contributors at Script Magazine, and I personally edit all their posts. And so I'm taking a huge chunk of my week just editing content, let alone doing everything else. Mm-hmm. So, and then every time you think you're done, and contributor submits another piece. So it's easy to get caught up in doing all this other stuff first before I allowed myself my time to write. So now I've flipped it. I now have given myself permission that the first hour of every day belongs to me. And that hour I spend writing either the novel or the screenplay, whichever one I'm feel inspired to work on. Right, I'm about halfway through the novel, and then I switched over because I have to do a rewrite of Slavery by Another Name for the producers. So, but whatever it is, I do it for the first hour of the day, and then every afternoon, about maybe 3:00, I do another writing sprint, either a half an hour or an hour long. I call them out on Twitter so other people join me and we write together. And I find that having just those two blocks of time a day, I can make tremendous amount of progress. And then I can do the editing and things, some of that stuff at night, that it doesn't take as much brain space as being creative and coming up with fresh prose. Mm-hmm. So I'm fortunate in that I do my editor job from home, so I have a little bit of flexibility, but I definitely have discovered that writing first thing in the morning for me is the way I can be most productive and consistently write every single day. And it also it changes my mood. Like, it makes me feel less frustrated that I'm not a full-time writer, because at least I took care of my needs as a writer first before I did everything else. And so that's what helps me.
That's excellent advice. Excellent advice. So let's talk about some of your recent writing projects. You're working on a movie called Impass. How did that kind of come about, and what's the story behind that?
That was a short film that we shot, and it's done. We're now submitting it to festivals, and we just brought on a film festival expert to help us, give us advice, because I don't have the time. So it's hard. Like, the whole festival thing is really hard, and I produced. So that was really interesting too, like producing your own work. I think as a short film is a perfect thing for every screenwriter to do, because then you learn so much more about the behind the scenes and what happens to your work when it's brought to life, and all the different people who come into play to interpret your words. And is the final movie the way I envisioned? No, it's not. It's not what I saw in my head, but it doesn't make it any less beautiful. It's just, to me, it's, as the writer, I'll probably always love the script more than anything else, because I just love the idea that everybody saw a different movie in their head when they read it, you know? But Impasse was a great experience, worked with really talented, incredible people. And I tried very hard to let go of control. You know, even though I was the producer, I didn't want to micromanage the director. I didn't want to micromanage things in post. And so it was a great experience for me to just let go and see what happened. I'm really proud of the product. It really, the final product came out great, and the cast was incredible.
Great. As a producer, I mean, what was sort of involved? Did you raise the money? You did all the hiring the crew?
Yeah, we raised about $15,500 on Kickstarter.
Oh, okay.
Is grueling. Like, you know, hats off to all those producers out there. So we raised the money, hired people, got the equipment. I was schlepping around. We flew everybody down to Florida because that's where the director was. I mean, we did some very strange choices, you know, in hindsight, but at the time they seemed like good ideas. And there's definitely things I would have done differently, you know. Screaming hot in Florida right around 4th of July to shoot a film was nuts, you know, but it all turned out fine. But so raised the money and did all of the hiring and casting, and basically the big thing about Impasse, though, was the whole story and concept of Impasse was born on Twitter. I was sitting in a Starbucks one day, and I just happened to watch this couple, and I couldn't hear anything that they said, but they were having an argument in the freezing cold rain outside for like 45 minutes, and I just started tweeting everything out. And I had hundreds of people watching the Twitter stream. And at the end of it, 2 agents approached me and said, whenever you write your novel, I want to read it, because what you conveyed in 140 characters had me in tears. And so then and my last tweet was to the director saying, I think we have our short film. And so because it was born on Twitter, we tried to cast it and hire people to work on the project who we had met solely from social media. The only people who we had not met from social media who came on and helped us were the kids who came on to volunteer down in Florida. What the heck, gosh, you know, I can't even think of the name of the school. But they were great, and they came. But those guys we had not met on social media, but we got them through somebody on social media. We used Stage 32 and Twitter predominantly to find people.
Let's talk a bit about Slavery by Another Name. I read your blog post on sort of how you got that going. I mean, it's an inspiring story, and I get so many emails from people that, you know, are asking me questions that, you know, are specifically what you answered. Hey, you know, I like this book. How do I go about getting it? And it's like, it's not something I've ever done. The thing that I found most inspiring about your story was that, you know, there's no playbook that you had to follow. You just get out there and do it. And, you know, good things can happen to people who are out there just making stuff happen out of, you know, just really just out of thin air. You just created an opportunity. So just give us a quick overview of how you got that going, how you met the author of the book and pitched him.
I think the trick was not thinking too much, you know, like not just doing it. And I kind of, at that point, I had only written romantic comedies, and this is a grueling, intense drama about slavery post-Civil War, 40, you know, and what we ended up crafting was something that was 40 years after the Civil War. But this book spanned like 80 years of history. This was a gigantic Schindler's List kind of project. And I had zero writing samples to back up that I could do this. But just nothing except just a deep belief that this was the story I was meant to tell. And so I kind of stalked the author for about 6 months prior. At the time, he was the Atlanta bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal. So here I am, a little country girl in upstate New York. I mean, literally, the nearest traffic light to my house is 7 miles away. I live in the middle of nowhere. I can't even see a house from my house. And what I thought that, first of all, how I thought I could even write something about slavery. Like, I'm a white girl from the North, you know. It was just, I think everybody could relate to that feeling of being trapped and imprisoned and not being able to live the life that they truly want to live. And I think that's the thing that spoke to me about it, that made me so passionate about pursuing it. So one day I saw, after about 6 months, I kind of stalked him to make sure that he wasn't some pompous jerk, and, you know, that he actually was somebody who might be approachable. And I really loved his interviews. I was very impressed with Doug. Douglas Blackman is the author of the book. And so one day I saw that he made the New York Times bestseller list. And I thought, oh my God, I lost my chance. Oprah's going to call him. So without even thinking, I just picked up the phone, and there was a phone number on his website, and just picked up the phone and left him a voicemail saying I was going to be in Atlanta the next week on business, and can I meat you? I'd love to talk to you about adapting your book. And then I wrote him an email, and this long email, I was trying to be engaging, show my personality, that I, you know, was smart and fun and I could do this. And so, and as a matter of fact, I don't know, maybe that was 4 years ago, maybe 6 months ago, he found the original email I sent him and forwarded it to me. And but basically the next day he called me back and said, are you famous? Like, should I know you? And I'm like, no, I'm not famous at all, but I really want to adapt your book. And so I flew down to Atlanta to meet him. And what he didn't know is that I had no business in Atlanta, zero business, no reason to be there. I just spent the money, spent 3 days in Atlanta, and met with him several times. And he was not convinced. You know, he was very appreciative of my passion for the project, but he's like, look, you know, you've got no credits behind you. You are an unproduced screenwriter. Like, why should I attach myself to you? Because if I attach myself to you, I'm pulling the project off the shelf. And I just, you know, wouldn't give up, you know? And so I was like, look, I just want to meet you one more time. Can you give me 10 more minutes? You know, I just felt like I needed something to secure this deal. And so I go into the Wall Street Journal office, the bureau, you know, the boardroom of the Wall Street Journal offices. And I just I'm trying to calm down because the secretary said it was going to be late. And so I did what I do, which is karate. I was at that point, this was 4 years ago, I was training for my first degree black belt at that time. So I just started doing karate forms in the boardroom. And before all of a sudden, I'm literally full-blown sidekick over the table, and the door opens, and there's Douglas A. Blackman. And he just looked at me and goes, well, this is a first for the journal offices. And that was kind of it. Like, that changed everything. Like, it changed the tone. It made us both just humans. And we just sat down, and he said, look, you know, don't discount the fact that you have great passion for this. And that's important to me. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I just spent the next 6 months as if I just made it impossible for him to say no. Like, I just kept going on it as if he had said yes. So I kept writing outlines, sample scenes, anything to get him to pay attention to me. And he finally admitted that he wanted to say no to me, but that he couldn't because what I was giving him was too good. And he knew that I got to keep going with this girl. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did.
So now with 12 Years a Slave getting, you know, some Academy Award consideration and stuff, it seems like this is perfect timing for a movie like this. What's sort of the status of this film and what are you guys doing with it?
Well, right now we had a great draft, and then 12 Years came out, and then became that's what this rewrite is about, you know, just to make sure that it is, because it's a very different story than 12 Years a Slave. I mean, this story is about, you know, 12 Years was so beautifully done and so painful and difficult to watch. But for someone like me who has such expertise in the area and in this subject matter, there really, I don't feel like there was really anything that new that people were learning. It was more of the same information that happened. A horrible, tragic story for this one particular man. Our story is more about what happened to the entire African American race in the South, decades after the Civil War, and how there was no such thing. That for a little period of time after the Civil War, people lived in freedom, but then the African Americans were back to the same thing because they created all of these laws, and a black man couldn't speak to a white woman loudly. They had to be able to prove at any given time they had a job or they could be arrested. There were all these incredible laws, and places like U.S. Steel and Tennessee Coal would go to the local sheriff and say, I need 20 workers. And they would just go out within 2 days, arrest 20 black men under all of these bogus charges, throw them in prison, charge them the cost of their trials, which they couldn't pay, and then sell them to a plantation owner for $40. And so unlike antebellum slavery, when people were sold for $800, $1,000, these guys were being purchased for $40. So they didn't care what happened to them, if they died, if they dropped dead mining in the coal mines. They didn't care because they could just get another for $40. It's a much more tragic tale of our nation's history that is unknown. And that's what we're telling. So it's the first trial of a white man being brought to trial for holding a slave, and that was in 1903. So there's a lot of the story is also a trial. So it's a very different tone, different time period. It's the same year that the Wright brothers learned how to fly. I mean, people were having, and African Americans in the North and other parts of the country were having some successes, but they kept, it was like, you can't read Doug's book and not understand why race relations are the way they are today. Mm-hmm. I mean, economic thing that the South just was addicted to slavery. And so we're trying to convey it in a way that is, not a history lesson, that is a dramatic story about a black man who gets enslaved, literally taken from the bedside of his dying wife and thrown into slavery, and at a time who was born free, and at a time when the world thought everyone was free, after the Civil War. So it's a very different story. But yes, we're hoping that the incredible work that these other films have done have opened the doors. I remember years ago when I was pitching Slavery by Another Name, and first hearing about 12 Years a Slave, thinking, oh no, what is this going to do? Because you never know in this business if something's with the same sort of feel about the subject of slavery makes your project irrelevant anymore, Mm-hmm. But,
so it sounds like you have some producers who are on board with this.
Yes. Okay. And again, Twitter. Doug Richardson, who wrote Die Hard 2, Bad Boys Hostage, I met him on Twitter, and he had given me some feedback. I didn't ask him. Here's a social media tip, okay? And I write about this in Balls of Steel, about how to find a mentor, how to get your work read without asking, how not to have to hound people and be annoying to network and to make inroads. So Doug and I met on Twitter, and we, just from a Follow Friday tweet, that we have a mutual writing friend who included us both as screenwriters in a Follow Friday tweet. So I said hello to him, he said hello to me, and then we just started talking, and he started reading my Balls of Steel article, which is one reason why people, if you do freelance writing, it gives people an opportunity to read your work and to see that you can tell story. And he could tell that in just a blog post, I could tell a story, a full story. So after about 6 months, he said, hey, can I read that Slavery by Another Name thing? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I sent it to him, and he read it, and I wasn't expecting notes. I wasn't expecting anything, and he read it, and he called me up, and he goes, I really, really like this, has so much potential, but it's not there. And he gave me some notes. At the time, I was collecting notes from some other friends who were writers. And so I thanked him and did another rewrite, and didn't say anything again to him. And he goes, hey, are you ever going to let me read that rewrite? And I'm like, sure. So I sent it to him again, and he calls me up, and he goes, I love the way you take notes. I love that you took some of them, you didn't take some of them, you took some of them and ran with them and created something completely different. And he goes, I want to work with you. I want to see if I want to show this to my agent. I want to see if I can help you. And then he brought in Tom Schulman, who wrote and won the Oscar for Dead Poets Society. And so I flew out to LA and met Tom. I had already met Doug, and that's how we got them on board. It was really smart networking and taking notes well. I would suggest to people to always think about being somebody people want to work with, like being easy to work with. Mm-hmm. Definitely having your own voice and standing up for what you believe in, but also really understanding how to collaborate and let it all go and not let the ego get in the way, because it's about the story.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's continue on that thread. Are there a couple other just FAQ type questions that you get as the editor of Script Mag, that you can quickly answer? Just maybe 1, 2, 3 questions that are very common that I know I get a ton of them, so I'm sure you do too.
How do I sell my screenplay? I have a screenplay and I want to sell it. Can you tell me how to sell it? And sometimes people will send that question to me in a Twitter direct message, where I literally have 140 characters to answer them. How can I possibly do that? So I wrote a post for Balls of Steel, the magic trick to selling your screenplay, where I basically tell them, there is no magic trick. Like, you have to just hustle, work hard, be a really good writer, learn your craft, don't be a jerk so that people want to work with you. And you have to network, go to Pitch Fest. I'm a huge believer in Pitch Fest. I don't think you're going to sell anything there, and that's not why you should go. You should go to make connections. And because if you write it, if one of those production companies, I don't even care if it's an assistant to an assistant who you're pitching to, it's still an opportunity that you don't have if you're just sitting at home. And then if they read your work, even if they don't want it and they like your writing, then you've got the open door. I always ask, can I send you my next script? Absolutely, send me your next script. So it's about making connections and networking with people, and that's what's going to help you ultimately sell it. Mm-hmm. And also, you may never sell it. So I also encourage people to consider taking their scripts and writing them as novels, because Hollywood loves intellectual property. So if you write as a novel, and even if you self-publish it, if it's doing well, then you have an opportunity for somebody to notice it, and then you've got the script already. You have the adaptation already done. And the script acts as like an outline for it. People ask me all the time.
I'm curious, how does that, how was having this award-winning novel behind Slavery by Another Name, how has that helped that? Because I get a lot of those questions too. Hey, I've self-published my novel, and I'm frankly always a little skeptical to recommend writing a novel, because I feel like I get a lot of the opposite, where someone's written a novel and then they've written a script and then they like, oh, well, this thing's a novel. Hollywood love novels. And it's like, yeah, but a self-published novel. I feel like these authors are splitting, they can't find any success with their self-published novel. So they think, well, I'll write a script, and all they're going to do is write a script that they can find no success with. And, you're better off finding success with your novel, because Hollywood doesn't like self-published novels. Hollywood likes successful self-published novels or successful novels, and don't split your attention and end up with an unsuccessful script and an unsuccessful novel. Spend your time doing what you like. If you want to be a novelist, spend your time learning how to market a novelist. But I'm curious, in your case, obviously this book was an award-winning book and got a lot of attention.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this book, it's a very different kind of adaptation than a straight-up adaptation, because it's a nonfiction book. Doug spent 8 years in the basement of courthouses all across the South gathering all this information to write this book. This was not just him sitting down making stuff up. We had to take those, I think it was close to 80 years of history that he has in there, and then find the 2-hour story in the 80 years of history. This was Herculean task. And so it's very different than if you just had a regular story and you adapt it. So it's really, our script is really in that time period, it's, and using what we can use, what really happened. And then there has to be some speculation. Obviously, we don't know their conversations and things like that. So writing something based on a true story is very different than taking a fiction novel and adapting it. And speaking to what you were saying about should screenwriters write novels or not, now that I'm writing one, it's a very different skill set. And but I'll tell you one of the things I love about doing it. And Doug Richardson has some novels out too. His website is dougrichardson.com. And if you go there, you can see some of his novels. He's done the traditional publishing route and successfully now self-publishing his work. And it is I ask him why he does it, and and I can totally understand it because it's the way I feel when I'm writing mine. It's so liberating to write something, to not have to please producers, directors, actors, to not have to have a million people to be just perfectly aligned in order for this story to get out, to have it be something that you have control over. Should everyone self-publish? Absolutely not. It still has to be written well. There still has to be filters. You still have to have a bar for yourself in terms of, hiring an editor, making sure that it really is a solid, good piece of work, because it's still your writing sample. So I see way too many people vomiting out self-published books every 3 months that I open them up and I start to read them, and as a writer, I can't get past page 5. So I think there's the danger in it too. I think you have to just, it's for each individual person. And also each story, some stories are more visual than they are prose, driven. So some screenplays aren't going to work as novels. So I think it's just one thing to consider if you have the right project, and if you are the person who would like to, you get to crawl in their heads more, and that's fun. Like to just be able to do that, because we don't get to do that as screenwriters. We don't get to talk about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, a memory that might get sparked in their heads. I mean, that part of it, I'm having a blast with. So it's nice to just switch it up a little, I think. It's
Sure. So let's move in and talk a little bit about Script Chat. What is that, and how can screenwriters benefit from tuning in?
Script Chat is one of those things that I hope I can do forever. Like that, I just hope that I have enough time to keep doing it forever. It was born one night on Twitter. Jamie Livingston, Zach Sanford, Kim Garland, and I were participating in what Twitter writers chat. Twitter has a lot of writers chat. This one was called Write Chats on Sunday afternoons. And as we're participating in it, we're all screenwriters, but story. So we just popped on Write Chat, and then I think it was Jeanie who said we should have a Script Chat. Like, just kind of threw it out there. And first we kind of laughed, and we're like, yeah, we should. Why shouldn't we? Like, how tough is this? So we had our first Script Chat, and I think maybe 20 people were on it, and then at the end of it, everyone was so excited that about having a group of screenwriters together talking, that one of the participants all of a sudden sends me a link and said, I just made you a blog. And we're like, oh, okay. And so then we figured out how to grab transcripts. And so on the blog, we have every week, whenever we have a chat, we have a transcript that we post afterwards for people who can't make it to the live chat, so they can go back and read it. Our goal is, it's free. Our goal is to try to get screenwriters as much knowledge and access to experts without costing them a dime. And so I spent countless hours working on the site and putting all the resources in the side rail and figuring out the best way to do transcripts and all of that. And so now we rotate moderators, and we find guests to come on. We had David Hayter, who wrote X-Men, Jane Espenson, who's huge, one of the top female TV writers, Game of Thrones, Caprica, Torchwood, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, people now, we're to the point now, I get emails from professional screenwriters and experts and producers saying, can I be on Script Chat? So it's a great community. We have 2 taglines. One is, bring your tequila and leave your ego behind. And the other is, it's not a competition, it's a community. And that's what we are. So we kind of smack down people who are all full of ego in the chat, and we just like people to keep it real, give each other advice. We'll have guests, sometimes we'll have open topics. I just did a special edition of Script Chat yesterday with Final Draft, because they came out with a new Final Draft 9, and a lot of our writers had questions about, is it worth the money? Is it, what kind of new features? And so I'm like, let's just see if they'll come on and talk to us for an hour. And they did. And they're like, yeah, sure. And they gave away 2 copies of Final Draft. I mean, it's, people are very generous with us too. We're able to get discounts to my tracking board and other services. So we try to make it as much of a benefit to screenwriters as we can.
So as I mentioned to you or before we started the interview, I tuned in on Sunday. One thing, and I tuned in like maybe on Saturday just to sort of see what it was like. One thing I noticed, and I'd be curious to hear as a moderator what you think. I noticed that a lot of people were putting, the hashtag Script Chat in their tweets, even though it, as best I could tell, had nothing to do with actually Script Chat. They were just trying to, get attention from screenwriters. I mean, they were just writing random tweets and most of them had to do with screenwriting. But as a moderator, how do you feel about that? I mean, for instance, if I were to publish a blog post and put # Script Chat, I'm not really participating in Script Chat, but I'm trying to piggyback onto that audience. How do you guys feel about that?
Love that. Because the Script Chat itself, the actual live chat, takes place on Sunday nights at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So what happens is all throughout the whole week, people will use the Script Chat hashtag to talk for the sole purpose of talking to other screenwriters and like go into the story. Scott Myers uses our hashtag all the time. So does the Blacklist. So does Amazon Studios. So, so do a lot of people. And so and Final Draft and so when obviously Script Magazine too. So when you want to talk to screenwriters and find other screenwriters, follow that hashtag and you will find other screenwriters and find tons of screenwriting information. It thrills us when people use the hashtag, as long as they're not spamming it, like, with their Kickstarter campaigns and things that really aren't for the community's benefit, that are for selfish benefit. Having said that, did I use the Script Chat hashtag when I was raising money for Impass? Sure I did. But that's because they're my community. They're who have ridden this ride with me and they wanted to follow how we were doing and follow what what we were doing. And they also knew I was going to write about it afterwards to give them advice on running a starter campaign. I would just say to them, you're crazy to think about doing. That I would just talk about it.
I've talked a little bit about Kickstarter on my blog. I'll have to have you back on because I'd love to get you get some real detailed information about how to run a successful Kickstarter. I mean, you have a big audience and you've been nurturing that audience for years. So I think that's really the key to Kickstarter is to having that.
Asking for help. I don't know if you're on Twitter, if you follow King is a Fink. They are, Julie and Jessica, they are amazing crowdfunding experts. You should have them on your podcast.
Okay. The other question I had was when I just went to the Script Chat website or something and you had some directions about how to use Script Chat and I clicked on whatever the first one, I can't remember what it was, but it opened up a new website with that little Script Chat. And so all the Script Chat tweets were popping up. I found it very difficult to follow like a conversation because people would just be piping in, they'd be answering a question, but it was like 3 or 4 tweets down. Are there any tools, specific tools that you use? Like how do you actually interface with Script Chat on Sunday?
I usually use that, and I think we used to use Tweet Chat for a long time, and this one is a new platform. Let me just find it because I don't want to I don't want to give the wrong name for it. I'm just looking it up on my computer because there's a few of them, but the one that I use most of the time. Sorry, I think because I have Skype on, I think the computer's going slow.
Okay. I'll link to it. I put show notes in the blog post, but it was the first one on your list. On your website, you have 3 ways of interfacing with it.
It's called tchat.io, and that is the most similar to TweetChat. And the reason we like it is because it automatically adds the Script Chat hashtag to your tweet so that you don't have to remember to keep typing it. Because if you're not, and only Script Chat hashtag tweets show up in there. So it filters out the rest of Twitter. So like if you're following thousands of people, it's hard to do the chat if you're not just focused on the hashtag Script Chat. But you could certainly do it in TweetDeck and Hootsuite. You could, however, search for and do it on regular Twitter and search for that hashtag. So what I do is, it's tough because people are talking to you. Like I usually have like my TweetDeck open so I can see when people are talking directly to me. Like I have a column of mentions over here, and then I have the T-Chat window open where I'm just seeing what everybody's saying. And you can't possibly, like if you're moderating or, it's hard, you're going to miss, and even the guests, they're going to miss questions, they're going to miss it. But that's precisely why I always post a transcript. And the other moderators do too, because there's so much that you miss, and the more people who participate, the faster it goes. So you're going to miss stuff. So it's nice to be able to just go back and know that all of those transcripts for the 4 years that we have been active are up on that website. And it's a great resource to go back and look and learn about TV writing, because we had a spin-off TV writer chat, which has now come back to us and is going to be the first Sunday night of every month. We're going to dedicate it to television, talking about television writing. But because we do this all volunteer basis. So when we did the spinoff, it just became too much time for everybody. So we're consolidating back together again. But
I think that's the key. What you just said, because I was wondering how the moderators would do it, but you have a window open. So the people that are speaking specifically to you, you can actually see them and respond. And it would almost be helpful maybe if I'd have done that. Like if I was interested in one conversation, I would open a window and look for, the at your name, and then I could follow that actual conversation.
In the how to chat page, that's what I do. You probably have to read down a little bit farther. Hey, people. Once we lost tweet chat, I had to give people other options of how to do it. And so I found all these other ways of participating in the chat. The other moderators did too. We were all, looking and researching different ways. So we listed a few to see which one, is intuitive to each person. And
yeah. Okay. So let's take a couple minutes. At this point, you're a social media expert. So I wonder if you can give me just some tips for screenwriters on how to network on Twitter and even Facebook. If you use Facebook, it seems like Twitter is your main platform, but just any kind of social media tips for networking and getting your scripts read.
There's actually and I can send you the link to it if you want to post it with the podcast. There's a link to I created a free download for Script Magazine that's about networking tips, online and offline networking. And that's really helpful. It has all of my Balls of Steel columns that I've written about it, about how I do it. Basically, if I had to condense it down into a nutshell, one of the reasons I like Twitter is that there's not that, unless somebody has protected tweets, and I usually don't follow people who have protected tweets, because this is social media. So if you're going to guard and protect yourself, what's the point? And Twitter, what I love about it is that people are accessible on Twitter. The kind of people Twitter attracts are pretty much people who are okay with being talked to. Jane Espenson is incredible about writing, approachable on Twitter. She talks to people. She answers their questions. I mean, she really wants to help other writers. John August is on Twitter. I mean, there's the Unknown Screenwriter. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's incredible. Sure. Twitter and Scott Myers and the Blacklist. I mean, they all talk, and this is their audience, and it's like a writer's water cooler is what I call it. So basically on Twitter, I would suggest don't protect your tweets, write an interesting profile, don't have your profile picture be a cat, and do not have it be something where you're 20 pounds thinner and 10 years younger, so that when they meet you in real life, you really like your Twitter handle. I have got people that I have no idea that that's them, not a clue, and I'm always scratching my head like what? Because honestly sends up a red flag in my mind, because I'm thinking, what else are they not truthful about? And it sends up those little tingles of spidey senses, like, can I really trust this person? So I try to recommend to people that you just be real, be nice, don't be a jerk, don't stalk people, don't pitch people on Twitter. Like that story I told you about Doug Richardson, how we built a relationship first before he got involved in reading any of my work. Same thing with Unknown Screenwriter. We built a relationship first, and then he said, "Can I read your script?" And then gave me feedback. So it's you can't just walk up to somebody in a cocktail party and just accost them about something. You still have to have social grace, even though you're behind a computer screen. And but I love it. I find people very approachable on Twitter. I think it's an incredible platform. But that free download has a whole bunch of specific.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely link to that. Sure. So
There's also another podcast I did with, and I can send you the link to this too, is a social media roundtable that I did with Joshua Secker, who at that time was the editor of Script Magazine, and Jamie Livingston, who does Script Chat with me, and we did this this social media roundtable. And in it, we give advice about Facebook and Twitter and all of that. It's a very comprehensive, I think it's a two-parter. It's like an hour and a half long podcast. I think it would give your readers a lot of information.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely link to that. So you've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. So just to wrap up a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about sort of your consulting service, what you offer to people, and how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about that?
Yeah, I do. I'm not a script consultant. I think that there are a lot of people ask me that, like, will you read my scripts? Will you give me feedback on my scripts? A, I don't have time to do that, but B, I'm just not a script consultant. That's not my expertise. What people turn to me for is more of inspiration, learning how to get past their fears. There's a video that I did for Script Magazine about controlling your fear, and it's a free download. I mean, the free video, you can just go on and sign up, and then you can get the access code to get it. But I talk about how I learned how to give up fear. And as writers, there's so many things to be fearful of. The producer, the agent, the rejection. I mean, we just want to sit in our cave, and most of us, and write. And we don't really want to have to deal with the business side of it. But the business side of it's really important. And in order to deal with the business side and to put yourself out, you have to have a certain degree of confidence. And so I help screenwriters kind of navigate that and figure out a game plan of it's more than just like a coach, it's more of a life coach for screenwriters, and so that's what I talk with people about, just any advice that I can give them. I learn about them, what things might be blocking them. All the years I've had as therapy, I'm a little cued into all of those things that people do to sabotage themselves. And I really love doing it. I love to see people grow and blossom and get to that next step.
And what's the best way they can learn more about that?
My website is jeannievb.com, just jeannievb.
Okay.
And V is in Victor, B is in boy. And there's a consultation tab up at the top. And I think there's also information on the side rail too.
Perfect. Well, I can link to that too in the show notes. So if anybody wants to learn more, just go to the show notes. So once again, Jeannie, you've really been very helpful, inspiring, and it's been great having you on. You've been very generous with your time. So I really do appreciate it.
Flattered and honored to be here. Thank you very much.
In the next Selling Your Screenplay podcast episode, I'm going to be talking with Richard Botto. He's the CEO of Stage 32, which is a social network platform for all types of creatives. He's also a screenwriter and producer, so I'm going to be talking with him about that too. So if you haven't already, check out stage32.com and keep an eye out for that interview in the next episode. Also, a quick reminder, on February 22nd, Jacob Stewart will be running an online class through Selling Your Screenplay called How to Write and Sell or Produce a Contained Limited Location Feature Screenplay. This really is one of the best ways to get your career into gear. It's never been easier to sell one of these one-location screenplays. And if you can't attend the live event, don't worry. All these online classes, along with all the past ones, are available to SYS Select members. So you can go back and watch this class and all of our other classes anytime that's convenient for you. To learn more about this class, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. In today's Writing Words section, I just want to reflect on what Jeannie's done to launch her screenwriting career. She's taken a totally different approach than what I've done, and I think that's great. She's really put her talents and personality to good use to advance her career. She's great with social media. She's really outgoing. She's great at networking in general and meeting people face to face. And her day job helps her meet people in the industry. So that's a great way to spend your time, even if you're gonna have a day job. And that's totally different to what I've done, which is basically send out a ton of query letters. Some of the things she talked about, like pitching the author of Slavery by Another Name, isn't something that I think I could ever do, and that's totally fine. My strategy suits my personality and talents, and her strategy suits her personality and talents. As I said, her strategy is completely different from mine, but it's working well for her. Ultimately, you've got to find your own strategy. There is no one way to succeed, and this is the key, you've got to do something. You can't just wait for things to come to you. You've got to get out there and make things happen. Think about your own personality and what you're good at and try and craft a marketing strategy around that. Maybe it's some hybrid of what Jeannie and I are doing, or maybe it's something completely different, but there has to be something. And it's got to be more than just writing a script, sending it off to a few people, maybe a contest or two, and then moving on and starting to write another script. You need to really come up with a solid, actionable marketing plan. Hopefully this podcast and my blog are helping you do that. So let's take a quick minute to talk about some specifics. I hate it when people dole out advice and I'm not exactly clear what the hell they're talking about. So let's try and just clear some things up. One thing that I think people don't quite understand about marketing is that a lot of it isn't some secret magic. A lot of it is just being persistent and covering your bases. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, I just finished a script and now I'm pushing it out to the various online places that I know about. Obviously, my own email and fax blast service is a big part of that. That's actually the only thing that I've had any success with over the last few years. But I'm also experimenting with these other channels too, and that's what I recommend to everyone. Try everything you can think of and see what works for you. And then if you start to have even a little bit of success in one area, really push harder in that area. Things change, and that's why I'm always trying to find new ways to market my scripts. I'm not just relying on the one thing that's worked for me. I'm actually out there trying to find other avenues too, because eventually this email and fax blast service that I'm doing, eventually it could dry up for whatever reason. So really, I don't think there really are any magic bullets. It's just a matter of experimenting and finding your own groove. One thing I do want to be clear on, though, is how persistent I've been. It's not just about uploading your script to a few sites and forgetting about it. I've been a member of Inktip, I think, for probably a year and a half now, maybe even longer. I've probably posted 6 scripts in their database, maybe more. I get their weekly newsletter too, and I almost always respond to at least 2 or 3 leads per week. I'm really consistent on this. The newsletter comes out on Thursday, and I try and always go through it either that day or the following day and submit where appropriate. This will be the 4th script I've uploaded to the blacklist, and I've done about 10 pitches for 2 scripts through Virtual Pitch Fest, so probably 20 pitches in all. And all this has led to exactly 0 success from these sites. As I said, the only success I've had in the last year or 2 is using my own email and fax blast service. I've had a couple of near misses on Inktip, but the other 2 sites have been goose eggs. And I'm not even close to getting discouraged with these sites. I'm going to keep hitting them and keep trying to figure them out and just keep trying to put more scripts up there and see what happens. I would say the only one that I'm really disappointed with so far is Virtual Pitch Fest. If I don't start to see better results on that, I'll probably remove that from my rotation. But the others, I'm going to just keep hammering away at the blacklist, Inktip for a while longer and see if I can get anything going with them. So keep in mind, this is just my marketing approach. Again, Jeannie showed in the interview today that there are a lot of things you can do that I'm not doing. So if you're still trying to figure out what works for you, get on Twitter, get on Facebook, get on Stage 32 and start networking. See what you can do on the social networks. Enter contests and see if you can get any traction there. And of course, also try and do some of the things that I'm doing. And hopefully all these things together, you'll start to see some positive results. So anyways, that's our episode. Thanks for listening.